Well, joining us now is the Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe. Premier, thank you for making the time this evening.
Well, thank you so much, Michael.
So here you are, you're threatening to withhold collecting and then sending the carbon tax to Ottawa. You know, immediately I think, is this legal, or are you willing to go to court to fight this one?
Well, I think the first thing to identify with, Michael, is this is about fairness for all Canadian families, particularly for us. We're concerned with those families in Saskatchewan. And so we've always thought this carbon tax scheme is the wrong scheme. But at least with the exception of Quebec was being fairly well or equitably put into action across Canada. With the most recent changes in Atlantic Canada, that just simply isn't the case. There is definitely an unfairness about how this policy is being put into place. So it's still the wrong policy. Now it's being unfairly applied to Canadians. And so what we have said to the federal government and asked the federal government to do is to apply it more fairly to all forms of heat. Of heating that we have across the nation, make it fair for all Canadian families, including those in Saskatchewan. Should they not do that, we will make every effort as the government of Saskatchewan to ensure that Saskatchewan families are receiving the same or a similar benefit as they are in Atlantic Canada.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting because when you bring that up to Liberals, I've been talking to a couple since I saw your post on social media today. They will point to the fact that, one, it is home heating oil, so they argue that's a national program, and they also talk about the rural rebate and the doubling of that also being national. So when you say that it's not being fairly applied and they make the argument that it's national, how do you respond?
Not being fairly applied. 40% of our energy bills, our Sask energy bills for a Saskatchewan family are carbon tax related. That's being forgiven in Atlantic Canada largely. And so they should apply this across all heating sources. We have electric heat in some areas, many northern and Indigenous communities in Saskatchewan, propane heat as well. So our ask is for the federal government to apply this to all heating sources, regardless of how you heat your home, treat all Canadians equitably and fairly. And if you go back to the very basis of how the government actually was able to enact this tax in the very beginning. One of the understandings was that the federal government needed to equitably apply the tax across the nation of Canada. They're not doing that anymore. It's not being applied fairly. It's not being applied equitably. And most certainly, if they want to address affordability concerns, all Canadians are faced with affordability concerns. And I'm sure all Canadians would like to have the carbon tax removed from their home heating bill. I know 40% of the bill would disappear here in Saskatchewan if they did that. And I think Saskatchewan families would greatly appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Are you worried, though, at all, Premier, that the argument that you're making might affect national unity? For example, pitting Saskatchewan against Atlantic Canadians?
Well, I am worried that the federal government, by exempting one area of Canada predominantly from their carbon tax scheme, is doing just that. It is very divisive. It does, in many cases, raise questions around the unity of Canada and why the federal government would ever treat Canadians differently. I don't understand it. We're going to do what we can as a provincial government to equalize that playing field, if you will, and to do everything that we can to provide some affordability measures for Saskatchewan residents that would match what the federal government has done now for people largely in Atlantic Canada.
Now you say, again, that you will withhold the carbon tax effective January the 1st. Beyond that date, what kind of timeline are you looking for? Are you looking for a progress of talks? What's on the table here?
Well, we would hope that it doesn't come to that. We would hope that the federal government does extend their pause, their 3-year pause, to all Canadians, including those in Saskatchewan. And I think that's the decision point that needs to happen at the federal level with the coalition government that we have here today. Is are they going to treat Canadian families equitably and treat them the same regardless of where they live? Should that not happen, we have a plan here in Saskatchewan that we most certainly will follow, so that Saskatchewan families are treated fairly. But again, at the end of the day, The ball is in the federal government's court. They started this conversation climbing down from a policy that we always thought was the wrong policy. And now most certainly is it not only the wrong policy, but it's certainly being applied unfairly to Saskatchewan families.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if Ottawa has responded in any way to what you posted on social media. And I appreciate it's just a few hours old now, but have you heard anything?
No, which isn't out of the norm. I think Ottawa is, not in the habit of reaching out to Saskatchewan for advice, responses, or anything. And listen, the province of Saskatchewan, myself as Premier, our government, we don't need to start a fight with the federal government. And this isn't about fighting with the federal government. We have much that we disagree on. This is about fairness for families. And our concern is Saskatchewan families who are being excluded from a pause on the carbon tax on the fuel that they're using to heat their home. That is unlike what is happening in Atlantic Canada. We think there's just an inherent unfairness in that, and what we're making, decisions that we can, as a government of Saskatchewan, to bring some fairness back to that conversation. We would ask the federal government to do that on the national level. They are a national government for all Canadians, regardless of what their Minister of Rural Economic Development feels, that you need a Liberal in order to be represented at the national level. We feel the federal government should represent all Canadians equally. If they don't, provincial governments will, and that's what we've indicated we'll do.
Premier Scott Moe, always appreciate the time. Thank you for this.
Thank you so much, Michael. You have a wonderful day.
You too.